Athleticism is your body's ability to dynamically express the force you can generate internally onto your environment. And so sure, being strong in the most traditional sense is good for many different reasons, but ultimately playing a sport isn't just how much you can squat, rather how you're able to apply that raw strength that you have into actual athletic movements. And so because of this, movement sort of being a qualitative measure of covering a certain amount of distance over time, because you're trying to apply force through this distance over time, this is what's going to make athleticism or any sort of sport movement related to this idea of power. And so this is essentially what a lot of these fancy strength conditioning programs come down to. Sprint training, vertical jump programs, all of this stuff is really just how do you create more power for yourself? Vertical jump being creating vertical power, and sprinting being a little bit more of a complex horizontal movement. And so similarly to how I described movement, power is essentially just force times velocity. Force being the amount of strength that you have or the newtons of force that you can generate, and velocity being distance over time or the speed that you're traveling. But in the context of sport and relating back to the question of what does it actually mean to be athletic, sport will more often than not reward relative power rather than absolute power. And so things more along the lines of how much can you squat relative to your body weight will usually translate over to having a better vertical jump versus having a bigger gross maximal squat, but it doesn't necessarily translate to having a high vertical jump if your body weight is very high. And so I usually like to just kind of sum that area up as watts per kilogram. And so as we go on throughout this series, a common theme we'll kind of like come back to a lot is more often than not, building up certain qualities will usually create the ceiling for what you're able to achieve. And then targeting specific adaptations will just allow you to access certain levels and certain heights of that ceiling that you've created for yourself. And so sometimes it's very beneficial for an athlete to improve strength over time, trying to chase bigger and bigger numbers, because it just allows a higher ceiling at the end of the day to create more power through. Because if we think about it, power or any sort of explosive movement, you'll usually be accessing around 50 to 70% of your maximal force capabilities. The same thing then relates to things like your cardiovascular engine. Depending on peak watts or your VO2 max, building up your thresholds over time will allow you to access more of your total watts, access more of your true ability, and be able to sustain workloads a lot longer. There's a lot of different directions that I could go with the rest of this video. I think for this video specific, I'm gonna kind of just stop this rant here. But all in all, athleticism is your ability to produce, absorb, and redirect high amounts of force through meaningful distances and directions within very short periods of time. And this is all relative to your body weight, your environment, and the demands of your sport. So thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you got any questions, inquiries, or things you would like to see, then make sure to tap that like button, leave a comment, and I will be sure to make a video as soon as I can answering whatever questions you guys got. Peace.